Okay, thank you for attending this live workshop. It's a continuation, actually, of the Ask the Experts webinar that we ran. I think it was last month, and we had requests for a bit of a deeper dive from the theory that we presented during that session to some actual examples or some more use case specific information, which is why we invited Dale Hopkinson, our senior pre-sales consultant, to introduce how we solve new business model challenges. And so I'm going to hand over the speaking rights to Dale. Just before I do that, for those of you who haven't joined any of our webinars before, there is a questions panel on the bottom right-hand side. I will be moderating these questions, so please feel free to just submit any questions as we go through the webinar. This is a small group, so it is intentional so that we can interact as much as possible. So again, just feel free to submit a question. I will see this and I can then stop Dale, or we can address them as we go along. So over to you, Dale, and let's enjoy this session.
Great, thanks, Ariella. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining our session. As Ariella mentioned, kind of want to take a deeper dive into what we presented a few weeks ago. So we kind of want to share our experience as well as walk you through the process and the mindset we walk through as we help our customers who are interested in capturing greater value and revenue, of course, from their software. This, of course, is going to be a very condensed version. This typically begins with a discovery session that can be between 1 to 2 days, sometimes longer if needed. Then, of course, working together to sort of create deliverables. But in this session, we'll look at the key items that causes the business transformation, a bit of review here. Then we'll identify the common challenges that we typically deal with companies as we walk through this implementation. And then we'll take a look at, of course, some implementation scenarios. So I kind of selected 3 of the core things that usually comes up. Of course, your situation, you'll have some uniqueness on that. But it's very, very common scenarios that we deal with to kind of give you an idea of what you need to begin to solve as you shift different business models. As Ariella mentioned, we'll have some dedicated Q&A at the end. But of course, as she moderates, if there's a question that's in time with what I'm presenting, I'm more than happy to answer that. Then we'll wrap up with closing thoughts and giving you some resources that you can begin to reach out to next. So once again, thanks for joining, and let's get started. So of course, as I mentioned, some review. So one of the unique things that we're seeing is really with the business transformation of IoT, this really creates new avenues for value capture, right, in your software and your services, as well as gives you great insight into also how you deliver and what is being used, actually, how you deliver. So traditionally, the devices were really just in isolated environments, and you had a physical deployment and typically perpetual sale with maybe some maintenance on top of that. Then there became this whole life cycle piece where you may have done some remote support or automated upgrades. And in that, you were able to achieve some customer insights. You would send a field tech team and a field service rep maybe were able to identify some things of how your solution was being used, whether it's based on capacity or different options there. And now we're being faced with this sort of ecosystem, right, where things like analytics and monetizing services and even allowing third-party software or even hardware to be in play. So it becomes how do you capture value, sort of as this shift begins, right? And these are, again, just the premise of how things are based when we begin to engage with our customers. What's interesting, when we begin these workshops and these scenarios, of course, there's 2 sides of it, right? There's the business side and the technology side. Technology side, a lot of times because we're technical people, we tend to gravitate towards the technology and we want to jump in and solve and write code and solve things automatically. While that's certainly of a value, we also have to take a step back to really begin to understand what this shift does, right? Because again, this is really going to cause an organizational impact. When we have our workshops, we have teams, operations and fulfillment, IT, marketing, R&D, customer support, product management, and finance, of course. And respectively, each group has their own concern that, of course, they need to make sure that's met. For example, customer support, they want to understand how do they ensure a consistent and good customer experience. While product management, of course, is concerned with how do they price and how do they drive roadmap. While operations is thinking about how do they operationalize this and fulfill this, etc. So some of the key things, we've documented and identified as far as the shift, when you begin to shift from being a product-centric company to more service and software-centric. So these are definitely the things, you'll be faced with if you're not looking at already. And as far as the challenges we'll kind of look at today, again, there are many others, but these seem to be pretty universal. Of course, when you're looking at now new systems to and/or processes to sort of help that shift and look at that organizational impact, some of the top things that usually come up is around scalability. So looking at existing systems, they may not be able to scale to what you need, right? If you need to do more dynamic pricing or billing, etc., the traditional ERP that you have or the modules that you have may not allow for that. The same as when you begin to look at your processes, right? We see a lot of manual processes still. While that works, there's of course the gap, right, where at some point in time the volume is not going to allow that process to sort of scale and to be efficient. Then ultimately, you have a lot of people probably doing the same thing, right? If you can automate that, you can be a bit more efficient and not have to be concerned with wasting productivity. And then usually we see also disparate systems, right? There's many different systems, whether it's a monetization system or a CRM system, ERP, etc. They're just not connected. And usually what happens if you have an acquisition or you have multiple product lines that may be fulfilled or supported different ways, you deliver an inconsistent user experience. So if your end user purchase in something from product line A and product line B, to give them this two different experiences when it's the same company, that's something that we see even be a sole catalyst for driving projects. Sometimes, just the customer satisfaction and dissatisfaction, those things are high and low enough to warrant, sort of this shift itself. Then, of course, ultimately it comes back to you, right? Being able to have access to data. The sales data, the entitlement data, the service level data, etc. Having the ability to consolidate that in one place will give you great value. You can begin to drive campaigns and promotions, etc. And even giving the sales team information to follow up with, what customer has been using the service or not using the service, or what customer has used beyond the capacity, etc. Right, valuable details to enable the sales team to now follow up and ideally continue to provide high customer value as well as renewals, etc. Because again, when you think about the whole customer strategy or the customer value, it's no longer transactional in this kind of service and software oriented approach. It's really now thinking about the lifetime value of that customer. So how do you provide the best support services and value to that customer? So as we begin to sort of drill down into the, a sort of a digital architecture, there's really four core components, right, or four distinct elements that we have to consider. Of course, your product and service, right? What does this shift mean to your product and service? Do you now have to enable things like SaaS and or cloud or support virtualization, right? Or are you still bound to hardware? So you have to begin to think about those things, right? How do you support cross-platform or cross-operations systems if you need to? And of course, there's the layer of the software monetization. This really involves more of the package setup, entitlement, usage, and even security still. We see sometimes, it's really advantageous to think of security on the devices, etc. There's a layer of commerce, right? Again, with these models, it's not foreign that, you may provide a module, some kind of management module or a cloud service module to manage the devices that you have there on the site. That may be a level of service and software where the customer can go and purchase and do self-subscriptions and do self-service based initiations, etc. So again, thinking about the existing systems, is that able to capture that billing and really identify that user or customer or company and provision something automatically without having to get you involved, right? Then ultimately it comes back to customer interaction, again, thinking about now, with the shift, you're going to begin to think about the customer lifetime value, having details and information about the customer to be able to to do marketing automation and to do promotions, etc., maybe even unique to that customer account, is greatly needed, right? So these are the four elements we'll kind of dig in. We're really focusing today on more of the software monetization element. Then, of course, some benefits of this sort of architecture and thinking and looking about things this way. It ultimately comes down, you begin to drive incremental revenues, great customer experience, consistent and high, and also fast time to market, right? Being able to provision things automatically and give instantaneous access, it's sort of, it increases the customer experience. The closer you can align the delivery to the point of demand, drives great user experience. I was at the Industrial Automation show a little while ago here in Chicago, and there's some companies that they're thinking about things like manufacturing as a service, right? How can they instantaneously turn on new functionality or new capacity? I met companies that they're delivering fixes automatically to the robots and the e-commerce that's doing picks on the shelves, right? So these things are very real, and you have to think about this architecture, and sort of the approach. So just to set some context as we begin to dig in, so these are the sort of from our software side that we're going to sort of talk about. So just to give you a bit of context, Sentinel, when I speak about Sentinel EMS, again, I'm just giving high-level context. If you want to get more deeper information, do follow up with the sales rep, and we can spend a bit more time specifically to your environment in your case. When I do speak about the Sentinel EMS, so you hear me reference that, that's really our license entitlement back office. So through that, key functionalities there are going to be things like integration to your own back office systems, ERP, CRM, billing, because we will be the source of truth for entitlement data. Also license key generation. One of the unique things with our piece, our software is we're agnostic. So if you have a homegrown license or a third party, you grow through acquisitions, etc. It may not be required to remove those, those existing licensed technology. Sometimes that's very difficult. You have the devices and/or software that you have already deployed, and that may cause too much of a disruption. So you want to operationalize and track, the same way, regardless of what technology it is. Of course, we collect usage. You can decide how you want to consume that usage, either through our EMS, or we also base off web services. So integration becomes seamless, of course, working through the process and the requirements there. Then, of course, facilitating ESD, electronic software download, if we need to. So we'll, just again, to set some context, and then when I speak about the Sentinel licensing, so again, this is more of the bits that goes into your application to take some kind of authorization decision, right? Can the software and/or device do something, yes or no? Controlling a license model, tracking the usage, even protecting IP, etc. So let's sort of dig into, again, more of the approach from the the workshop implementation aspect, right? So as I mentioned, throughout the workshop, we begin with a discovery, understanding your environment and your use cases and what you want to solve, etc. But of course, for the purposes of this call, we really couldn't do that. So kind of to give you a flavor of sort of the three core things that usually comes up in some aspect, one way or the other, we'll take a look at these three things today. So really the back office integration. So how do you operationalize and drive operational efficiency through the entitlement and device and ordering, and what happens to the MES, et cetera, et cetera. Moving to this way of these business models may cause you to support multiple sales channels now, right? So how do you do that from the entitlement aspect? Do you need to do that from the entitlement aspect? And then again, thinking about the shift that causes, the focus now on the customer long-term value, there's definitely going to be some need for customer experience, which usually one way or another touches customer self-service, right? Giving the end customer the ability to do something, take action or report or have data, et cetera, et cetera. So again, these may differ more specifically for what it would look like for you. But again, this is where we would speak with you and really come up with a more focused plan and approach. But these are, definitely 3 core things, if you're not looking or thinking about today, that will come across. So when we look at the first scenario, so I kind of talked to the, common scenarios, common things that happen, give you, sort of the end result, the implementation approach as we walk through it. So here's a common, scenario. The new business models, they typically require faster fulfillment, right? If someone signs up for a subscription, they usually want access immediately, right? Because they sign up and the subscription starts from usually purchase date. Then another scenario is integrating an ERP to generate the entitlement. The entitlement is sort of the right to use. Then having the entitlement data and or licensing data for actionable intelligence, right? So if someone is on a subscription and you want to pull that subscription date and or even the actual usage, capacity usage, etc. Was working with one company a couple weeks ago. They want to track how many picks, right? Because they said, so while we sell robot, they don't want to be known for selling robots. They want to sell the outcome of what the robot does, right? So they're moving to more sort of outcome-based pricing, right? So to get that data back into their system, they'll begin to drive the billing, etc. So having that, you can do a number of things, whether it's just purely for intelligence to understand how is your software and services being consumed or used, or if you're driving billing, or even roadmap, right? You can understand what popular functionality you have and, where you should begin to allocate in dollars and resources accordingly. So of course, the benefits, it's 100% automated, right? You reduce your employees, especially operations, from having to do multiple things where you can automate. And then of course, from the customer standpoint, the customers can be instantly notified, right? And of course, delivery, it would depend if you're delivering also some hardware with that. But they can, according to your implementation, get immediate access to the software. So sort of, again, this is, the very simplified view of, a few days of working together. But typically what the actual point of integration looks like and how the integration happens, I can talk about that and give you a high-level approach or high-level insight into that. But typically what happens once the sales order line is close to an ERP or even sometimes a CRM if it's being used that way, some level of details is sent over to Sentinel EMS. Right, EMS would take the appropriate details, which is typically, of course, the line item or items, your SKU, any quantity, any particular end dates. If you want to associate, the sort of the ship to and partner and end customer, distributor, etc. It's however you want to identify this purchase on the entitlement, and that generates what we'd call as the entitlement and the entitlement ID. So this is a piece that, depending on your implementation, would go to the customer, and they would use this as their record. They can even use it as the right to redeem a license, or if this is something where it's being, shipped and sort of provisioned internally, this will go to MES, and they would use this to sort of provision the software before shipping, right? So a number of options there according to your scenario. But one of the most important things is whatever you need to have on the entitlement, you certainly can, right? So this is a point of where we would really work with you to understand what are the important elements that you have or that you need. But again, most importantly is the integration is bidirectional. So you can have as little or as much data you send to EMS. The bare minimum we would need is just simply line items and quantity and any terms, end date, etc. Once we have that, we would create the entitlement, and you can even use EMS more of like a subsystem, right, where your ERP or your CRM system would now pull back in the entitlement ID and associate that to the sales order internally. So when you look up things by the sales order, you can see not just the sales order details, but you can also see the entitlement level details and or licensing and or usage if you want to, right? So you have multiple approaches, but the idea here is we make it seamless, right? To make it seamless for your internal staff, you may be more concerned with what a sales order is beyond, an entitlement ID, which of course is something you can customize. It doesn't have to be the long notation that you see here. As far as implementation approaches, again, walking through this, in a sort of more accelerated fashion than we would typically walk through in an engagement. So this is actually a live customer example that I was working with, right? So they have a number of partners. So they had SAP internally. Well, I didn't point out from our integration standpoint, we have some connectors, certified connectors from SAP, Salesforce, Oracle. Where we've done integration work on NetSuite, Microsoft Dynamics, and even customers who need integration. They also have the option to do the integration themselves if they wanted to, right? So our web service is published and public. It comes with the package, and we'll talk about this a bit later when I speak about the services approach. But it's something we can help with if you want us to. But you certainly have the ability to do the integration yourself. But back to this example. So this one customer, they had a number of partners, and they also had internally SAP. Their partners also had SAP. And they wanted to integrate in such a way where it was streamlined, where the partner would not have to fax in an order, and someone internally now enters that order into EMS, which kicks off, which kicks off the entitlement. So one method, of course, with integrating is you can be tightly coupled if you need to. So in this scenario, the EMS would be tied to their single SAP. And one option would be this can either be email, fax, order, or even if you're using EDI or even an integration point, right? So multiple ways. But the main method here is EMS is tightly coupled in this integration. Another example that we have, and again, this is a live customer example, but we can extract some valuable details here, is you can integrate EMS also into a loosely coupled integration scheme, where you have other subsystems, and these subsystems, they may be partner systems or internal systems, but they may have relevant data that you need or want to place on the entitlement, and you have a single web service here interface where this can be a middle layer, right? So if you have any kind of middle layer, we can plug into that, certainly seamless. But again, the method, and of course for you it would look a little different, but the main method is the EMS integration can be tightly coupled or loosely coupled, right? Of course, pros and cons to both, but certainly exploring what's best for you, we can identify. Good. So sort of here's a sort of after that integration. Of course, the integration work itself is work and process unto itself. But sort of here's what an end-to-end integration. I have a few of these. What end-to-end typically looks like, right? If things are being delivered from manufacturing, both hardware and software, so you can have the ability where you create the order, ERP, everything is internal. The ERP generates the entitlement, which goes to MES. MES does the actual activation. Both the hardware and software is activated, configured, and installed before it's shipped. Right. So certainly we support that method. Tons of details here. This is a very simplified view, but we've had cases here where this is doing things like multiple activations and multiple devices, and not necessarily one by one, right? So barring those details, we do support this sort of workflow where you do installation and configure before everything is delivered. And of course, there's the method where you sort of set up the hardware and you ship the hardware, but the end customer or partner or disti or VAR, someone externally is responsible for redeeming the license and activating the license and doing the software configuration components. So again, we support that. The only difference in this workflow, so to say, beyond who does the software installation, configuration, etc., is of course the communication. So once the sales order line is closed and an entitlement is created, optionally EMS can communicate to your customers via email, or that's something you can, again, with a bi-directional integration, you can pull those details back in and you can control the communication. So again, certainly optional, but we do support that sort of workflow. And again, this will look very similar. So if you only do software, right? I think we had some companies on the phone that they're more enterprise software also. So similar workflow, right? Of course, just beyond the hardware production state. So again, some key benefits of this. I mean, this is, there's a lot of stakeholders that benefit from this, right? IT, operations, finance, even customer service, etc. But one of the key benefits you see is, of course, cost reduction. You begin to have efficient systems and processes, right, which increases employee productivity. One not so uncommon case is, there's no integration after the order line is closed. Some details are now entered into a manual spreadsheet, which gets tracked by some tools internally that's used to send the customer their software information, and that's just all these disparate tools creates more work, right? More work for the employee, mainly operations folks and production and manufacturing. So being able to simplify those processes, you enable them to really focus on their core competence and to become even better at that. With the license integration, of course, being bi-directional integration, you can pull back in licensing data. So if you're working with a model where you're grabbing the actual usage of how long, whether the usage is duration or count or custom metric from your software, you can pass that back up and again ultimately pull that back into the ERP, right? So you can get usage on two levels. The entitlement usage will just simply give you things like subscription end date, level of service, etc. But the licensing usage would give you more insight into how your software is being used in conjunction with the devices once it's deployed. Then of course there's customer benefits, right? You have an improved data, not just data consistency, but an improved user experience, right? Things that deliver the same way. So again, I mentioned quickly the EMS system is not only producing Gemalto licenses, so it's any license, right? We can integrate to any license technology enforcement that you have. So those same workflows you saw, they're not only bound to just Gemalto technologies. Is again very common that we deal with enterprise and device companies who they grow through acquisition. They may have another product line that has a different license technology. That's the whole point of this integration. And the way EMS is architected the way it is, you have a single operational experience, which now gives a single customer experience. So again, just condensing a few details into those integrated approach, and mainly showing integration from the ERP/CRM side. But if you have any kind of business intelligence, we've integrated with configurators. If you need to do more dynamic ordering, integrating to billing systems if you're doing more of pay-per-use or usage-based or outcome-based pricing. You can grab details from the EMS and feed it into a billing system. So definitely, again, regardless of the system, once there's a business need and you need to solve that, integration is usually never any issue. So again, touching on the second core sort of use case or scenario that typically comes up is being able to support multiple sales channel, right? Two-tier or multi-tier, right? So partners buy software or hardware from a license and they resell that to their partners and or customers. That partner may need to manage the customer's assets, whether that's the hardware, software, or the license or entitlement. Then of course they need to be able to view across their customers downstream. So you want to ensure that, of course, those partners of yours can only view their customers, right? Some of the benefits there is that they're able to manage those assets in more of a self-service way, right? So when we look at sort of the common sales channels, again, direct is usually pretty simple. You know who the end user is at fulfillment time. So you have, insight there, right? And you fulfill those things direct. Then of course the reseller module, then of course multi-tier, right? So some of those things that come up and what we hear from our customers is their districts, they need a way to stock software licenses bought in bulk, right? Because you don't really want to have the disty doing this transactional every time something is sold to come back to you because they get a license. So they need a way to stock that and then to reallocate that, and sort of to view that and have insight into knowing how much they have, what's in use, etc. Then from the reseller's point of view, they need a way to stock the bulk licenses again. They need a way to sell that off to either another reseller or partner of theirs or a customer. And they need a way to manage, if they have VAR, to manage that customer license, right? Sometimes they do, again, with the software configuration or software installation side, part of their value add is they're doing that for the customer. So they need a way to redeem that, and again, only for their customers that they're managing. So the problem becomes, with an increasingly challenging for the vendor to deliver software keys and activation, right? So you have to have a solution that really supports and reflects that multi-tier distribution, not just from the visibility standpoint, right, but from the access standpoint also. So again, walking through and sort of whittling down those core things that typically comes up. Again, in your case, they may be very accurate or they may be just a little bit different. And again, those are the things we can discover and work out with you. But the channel needs asset management, right? They need the ability to view licenses if you're tying anything to software, to also be able to access that software and activate for their customer base and their customer base alone. From the customer assets, to be able to view a specific company at a customer at the company level, to see all that they have, whether it's by sales order, purchase order, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, again, from the inventory standpoint, right, not going to read all of this, from the inventory standpoint, this is really a big one, right, being able to sort of transfer licenses, right, after a sale, so pushing things downstream, right, so they have that bulk that they've gotten from you because they don't need to do a transactional thing with you every single time, but being able to properly allocate that, beyond a sale. So usually what happens, again, barring the details of the implementation and the work streams of that, typically what happens is there's some level of portal access, right? And again, this can be a portal that you develop, or you can extend your existing portal. What's nice is with EMS being based off of web services, certainly it's agnostic to us. We can deliver a portal to you to help do this, or you can extend what your partners already do, right? So again, having a portal where, self-service for those partners, where they can go in and they have the access, they have the appropriate views that they need to really service and to serve, their customers. Being able to view across specific customer, right? So being able to assist that customer and take an action. So if it's a specific customer, they want to do things like look at devices, see where a particular license is activated on what device, so they can help track. They can understand if a customer calls with, with the serial number 123, they can look up from their systems and understand, okay, what license is there. Being, of course, able to assist with the activation, which would come into play more so with the installation and configuration. Again, that's their value add, so they need to be able to do that for the end customer. Then, of course, if you have, and this is up to you, right, if you're associating any sort of maintenance or software downloads and updates with the entitlement, again, that partner of yours would have access to that, and they can take all of the action that's necessary for the end customer that they resold to in a self-service way. What's nice about this is, regardless of the action that's taken in the channel, you do have, of course, a visibility into that, right? So you can report on that, of course, if it's allowed, any legal kind of things you have going on with the partner. But you do have that data, since, again, EMS would be a source of truth for some of this data. And again, not really dig into all the details, some of the logic behind, this portal could be external to EMS also, right? If you have external systems to know such things like SSO, single sign-on, right? Of course, you don't want to have to create new credentials for your partners, etc. But some of the logic, may exist outside of EMS, which is certainly fine. And again, this is one of the big ones, right? Having your partners to be able to reallocate entitlements and licenses after they got a bulk from you, right? So being able to allow this self-service, in such a way where it's seamless and easy to the partner, again, enhances business, enhances the experience with you, and ultimately drives new revenue. You make it seamless for them to capture new value and capture new revenue even from their customers, right? They can see things like on this screen, what's available, what's in use, and even end dates, etc. So they can build their own campaigns and own renewal strategies around that. So again, sort of the key benefits here, right? So looking at, one, the channel enablement. So again, empowering the channel to do things, right? To sell piece of license inventory to partners and customers. Inventory management, right? And then also the asset management. So being able to give those things in a self-service, seamless way, certainly at an advantage. And then sort of looking at the third scenario, again, tons of use cases and details usually come through this, but sort of the common ones we typically hear is whether it's pure enterprise software, or you have the embedded software, allowing the customer to activate, download, and install software if that's the workflow. But giving the customer the access to do that, allowing the customer also to manage what they have already purchased. And usually not just the end customer, but allowing something like a site administrator who may not be associated on every single entitlement, but having the visibility into knowing what's purchased, what's being used, what's being allocated, etc. So tons of cases there, and one of the nice things is from a delivery standpoint, EMS is based off of web services. So if you have an existing customer-facing portal landing page today, you can use that and just simply augment and extend that to have these functionalities. You are not required to deliver a new portal, of course. That, trying to do that would actually diminish the customer experience. Customer has to go to 2 portals now for different things, one service portal and one entitlement portal, right? So that's certainly fine. We've done, and we're doing integration with things like service now, right? So there's a single portal, and customer can have all that they need through that, right? And of course, the benefit is really just giving the customer access to what they're using, what they have, that can help drive their compliance and really help them understand their purchase and purchasing history. Then of course, making it self-service, it really increases a lot of support tickets. Been around for a while, and we hear one of the #1 things with a poor implementation of licensing is it will increase support calls and tickets, right? So to make that seamless and consistent, definitely in your benefit. Again, sort of a whittled down, quick approach into the implementation. And what this looks like, again, we can deliver a portal, and one thing I did not mention yet, any portal we deliver, so you would get source code too, so you can change not just the look and feel, you can actually change workflows and really customize that to deliver an experience that you want to pass off as your own. Or again, you may have a portal that's sufficient, and you just simply want to augment with functionality with the license and entitlement functionality, which you certainly can do. So at a quick glance, really some things from this is the end customer, right? If they're logging in, 2 things, well, 2 to 3 things, and that's really the core things is redeeming their license by this process of activation, right? So being able to go in to activate software for the installation configuration standpoint. Also, if you're tying any entitlement to the maintenance and or subscription period where you want to deliver new updates, etc., that's bound to their entitlement, you can certainly drive that from the portal, so that user can go to their own landing page and they can see what they have the access to, download, install, configure, etc., etc. And again, the downstream workflow, if they're configuring every device or configuring something like a management layer that devices speak to, certainly we support both of those, and that's up to whatever you deem best as your user experience. But downstream, we certainly can support both. From a customer standpoint, also, I didn't really put a screenshot, but of course, fleshing out if there are multiple SKUs or orders that they had across, right? They can manage things by order numbers. So of course, having the visibility and the insight into their purchase history and also their usage history. When I say usage on this level, I mean it's just the activation history. It's also very common where in an environment where you're capturing usage, if you already don't have your own cloud sort of module or sort of localized management module that gives the end customer insight into the usage, we certainly can facilitate that also, right? Sometimes usage becomes a very interesting point as you think about providing the customer more value, right? Increasing the lifetime value by allowing them to understand their capacity and throughput and things like picks, etc., right? So some of the key benefits here, and again, one of the key benefits we always hear really is a decreased licensing support tickets, really increasing increasing customer satisfaction and lowering customer dissatisfaction, right? We've had projects where again, those were the metrics that were the catalyst for the project, and those things were measured both before and after. And after this sort of deployment, seeing pleasing results on both sides. Right, and of course, entitlement management. Customers, they have insight to all they've purchased and what they're using, etc. And in the model where you're tying software updates or software deliveries or deliverables to the entitlement, they have the immediate accessibility into that, right? Regardless of if you're still shipping hardware or not, they still gain access to that software near the point of demand. So wanna again sort of balance both sides, because we do both software and services.
Dale,
So sort of yes.
Sorry, can I jump in? Do you
Absolutely.
feel that you can take a couple of questions now? Just sort of maybe you want to breathe, or do you want to continue and take them at the end? How do you feel?
I can do this all day long, so I'm certainly fine. So let's probably go to a question to make it a bit more interactive.
Okay, so I'll unmute Benoit in a minute. That's one of the questions. But okay, it's a bit of a long question, and I'm not 100% sure, but maybe you're going to understand it better. The question is the fact that Sentinel EMS can work with third-party license generator leads the person asking the question to think that there might be a possibility for Sentinel EMS to accept third-party usage data and use it as the foundation for usage-based billing. So they're asking if we have encountered some implementation scenarios where the ISV would like to feed the software usage data collected by their own software mechanism into EMS as the basis for usage-based billing.
Yeah, great question, by the way. So it's something that we're working through right now. We have done it, right? We're looking at sort of standardizing this approach, because as great question, and it's a very common question that we're seeing now, right? Where you can have the entitlement system as a point of, usage data, whether it's third party, right? So sort of usage agnostic kind of functionality. So yeah, I would say probably let's talk a little deeper about the case. Again, to be clear with the answer, it's something we have done, but we're working more to sort of standardize that approach, right, to make that more core product.
Great. Let me unmute Benoit. Benoit, yes, you're unmuted, so you can just ask your question directly.
Hi. Yes, we're we're looking at some sort of hybrid licensing in a way, in that the user would start with a fixed fee for purchasing the license of the software you will install locally, but then it would also be possible for the user to submit jobs to our remote server, and for those jobs would be billed by based on the usage, basically, such as a fee for each 1,000 jobs or something like that.
Yes.
And that would be through also we also have resellers.
Okay.
So that would be through their the reseller system that you showcased earlier.
Okay.
So how feasible would that be? So I understand basically well, from what I understand, you implemented that, but more as a custom solutions for client, and it's not standardized yet.
So two things, right? From the partner side, all of us show there, those are standard things. The more customized I mentioned before was really the third-party usage. So I think with your question, it's really just more about, well, it's like, let me see, I wrote it down. So there's two parts, right? There's one, being able to have multiple things with different models, right? So as you mentioned, you install something locally, and that may be fixed, so that may be perpetual or just annual subscription. And then you have another piece where you submit jobs as billing. So that we can do, right? You can license two things.
The first part is pretty standard. It's like, you know, you have the base standard and premium version of your software. They each have their own set of features. The user will buy one of those, and from there, there's also an online feature where you would pass jobs to us. Meter processing at that point. And the more volume they do, obviously it's not the same price.
Absolutely. No, and I'm glad you added that piece of information. It's an online feature. I was going to ask that. So the piece I didn't really speak about in depth is really from the license, the Sentinel licensing piece. So we also have this kind of functionality where, our license allows you to deploy things more on-premise as well as do things online. So for that online function, the EMS infrastructure certainly can collect, if you want to collect that usage, we certainly can facilitate that, right? And I would say let's connect after to really go through some more details offline, right? But for this one, since you mentioned it's an online feature, I don't see problem there, right? We of course have to work through the implementation and what that approach looks like, and which way the billing is being passed, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have trouble. We do have clients that are that have on-premise solutions, and they would not necessarily be connected online. But how would you reconcile that? Let's say we are lending them software processing power, but how would you measure that if you're not online?
Yeah. So we certainly can do it locally, right? The thing now becomes, how do you have that customer to transmit that, right?
Yeah.
Is it a file? Can they connect dynamically? Can they connect on demand, or can they email you something? So that the collection is not the problem, right? We certainly can do that. It's the transmission, and then with that, it's how do you incentivize the customer to send that, right? So then those are things we've worked with before. So okay. Yeah, no, great questions. Now, I would say, so for me, from the technology standpoint, not concerned. We've done multiple things like this. This is more of like one of those process things, right? How and when would you do the collection? Is there a prompt for the user? Is it user initiated, etc.? Those are more the things to work through.
Okay. As for the well, let's say this is an online scenario where they're connected to our server and to lock our on. No, basically it's basically a token retrieval system in a way. How much custom implementation we need to do versus how much is implemented on your by your solution?
Wait, can I just jump in? Sorry, because we do have additional people online,
Sure.
and I feel we're sort of getting into a specific use case. Dale, can we maybe take this offline following the session?
We can. I was going to say just that, right? I don't think I know enough of your implementation yet to give an accurate answer. So we can take that one offline. But great questions, and by the way.
Okay, thank you. Sorry,
Okay,
Benoit,
sorry,
I just want to be conscious of time. Do you want to, you have my
no
email? You
problem.
can absolutely communicate with me and I'll get you all the answers you need. Is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dale, you can keep going, and I think I'll keep some questions for the end.
Yeah, I have just about maybe 2 or 3 more slides, so we can get through that and really get into questions.
Okay.
So again, from the Sentinel software, the Sentinel services standpoint. So again, really we have services where we really help our customers to align, the entitlement process and their licensing strategy to their business goals. Really for, again, sort of reflecting on what I just mentioned in the presentation, to streamline operational efficiency and customer experience. Right, so we have this methodology of the 4D, so we discover, design, develop, and deliver. And more so, sort of, here's the sort of the activities that we do. Again, what's nice is we can do as much heavy lifting as you want us to, right? In some engagements, we simply do the consulting up front. We provide the strategy and planning, and the enterprise, they have, or the device company, they have sufficient resources and time, of course, to do the implementation. And some we've done consulting and project management, right? So you can sort of pick and choose, right? Again, we have services to really make sure you have a successful project. And that's what we care about. We'll give you as much or as little help as you need it, right? So these things, how you decide to consume services from us or take a package from us, these are all case-by-case basis according to your need. So sort of, again, key takeaways, and we can, go back to questions, any of the written ones, or if some of the more interactive ones, certainly fine. So some of the key takeaways, right? Again, some of these are not so surprising. The market is evolving, right? Again, I was at the Automate show, and it was the industrial automation show, and to see the number of even robots and devices that had a SaaS module and were able to connect, that even surprised me. Not just the startups either, right? Companies are seeing value in providing automatic fixes, getting telemetry data back from what their robot is doing, and sending down fixes instantaneously. So the market is evolving, right? Which really leads to the impact on device and enterprise software vendors. Really thinking how you leverage this sort of this transformation. How do you capture new value, right? How do you compete, right? Globally, how do you enhance your value add, etc. Then ultimately, when you work through that to capture new value add or new value from software and services. Briefly, I think I was, hopefully able to articulate and to show, Sentinel software and services, we enable this, right? We work with a lot of customers who have been doing this, in the first shift from perpetual to subscription to usage to IoT. We've been doing this for a very long time, and we're pretty competent, and we're very customer focused based on you meeting your goals and objectives. So those are key takeaways, and yeah, we have time. We can go to any questions that we may have at this time.
Thank you, Dale. I want to raise one. It's a question that I've been answering while you talked, but I've had this a lot as well. So you talk about EMS, you talk about collection of usage, feature usage. So the question then is, okay, then do we also invoice? So maybe give a little insight as to maybe even the difference, right, between an entitlement management system and a billing system. They're not the same, they do different things. So maybe from a high level, just what we are able to provide, and then what information we would connect to a billing system, and then what the billing system would do.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, and it's always kind of hard in these things to give, the full context in this an hour, right? So the entitlement management system, so you can think of this, right? So first of all, the entitlement is the right to use. Some of the key things an entitlement management system will do is speak to license generators to generate the appropriate license that as needed for that sale, for that software. Then also tracking the usage of that, or two levels of usage. The first usage is, has this entitlement been activated or consumed, yes or no? The entitlement system would have that level of detail first and be the system of record there. And if you're also implementing in a model, one of our technologies in a model where you're grabbing back application usage, the application usage would come back also to EMS, right? So EMS would not look to replace any billing or ERP system, as we do not, kick off the invoices and communicate to users and do anything around the financial transaction. So of course the billing system, depending on, if it's more invoice and subscription renewal, however you're using that, that's where you would usually close your sales order line, where you have that internal tracking as far as, what was purchased from the user, etc. Then from there, if you have a more dynamic system, those things would be triggering invoices. So the intersect between the two is the entitlement system would or could have the actual usage, right? So you think about you do this deployment, and let's say you have a robot that's doing picks, right? You want to build based on a number of picks. The number of picks would be sent back to EMS. Now you can integrate EMS in such a way the billing system can fetch that from EMS and do billing on some periodic method. There are even outbound web services where you can push that, unless you're getting more to the implementation approach, right? But the level of details EMS would have would be used to feed the billing system, which would be ultimately responsible to kick off the invoice.
Clear. Thank you, Dale. We're getting to the end of the hour, so I want to thank you for this, and I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. We will send a recorded version of this following in an email following this, and you have my email, so you can contact me if you need or if you have any questions that you haven't thought of until now. So I want to thank you, Dale, and wish everyone a great continuation of their day and week wherever you are. Thank you, Dale.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks everyone for joining. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.